selfless, honorable, kind, devoted, jovial, optimistic. I didn't make it past 25 seconds without crying. And loved. These are just a few words that describe Second Lieutenant John Keith Lundberg, who was known as Jack, which is what I'm gonna call him. As you guys can see, Jack looks very serious in this picture, but that's not really who Jack was. Jack was a very, very happy man. Always loved smiling, making jokes with his family, telling cheeky stories. I'll also flip it. I just like this one of him. So with that being said, gotta get to my notes. Jack was born in 1918 in a very small little neighborhood of Valverde, Utah, to a mixed family. Both of his parents had been divorced, and they had children from both marriages. Jack and his siblings were incredibly close and protective of each other. To give an example, when Jack was young, he had been bullied by a neighbor kid. His brother Rich was so mad at that kid, he chased that kid all the way to the neighbor kid's home, and they had a screen door, and Rich ran right through the door to get that kid. He was so mad at that kid. And I know that that was the type of protectiveness and lovingness that this family had. When Jack was growing up, he was very smart, academic, involved in so many student activities. He loved speaking French, and after he had died and was identified, the man who had identified Jack's body was from Salt Lake City, and he actually went to high school with Jack, but I don't think they knew each other. But a French girl had given him information about what happened to Jack. And Jack's father, in reply to this, said, "Some French girl furnished data. So you see, his French chatter after all has done good." I don't know why he thought this, because at this point Jack had passed away, but that makes me believe that Jack must have spoken a lot of French at home, so I find it very fitting that he is here in France as his final resting place. Jack was a very loyal friend. Sorry. I think it says a lot what is remembered about you after you pass away, and his friends never forgot him. Back in the early 2000s, Jack's neighbor and really close friend, Ted Peterson, did an oral history of his life. He only really mentioned his family, except for one part. He talked about how he wanted to go to university, but he didn't know anyone who had ever encouraged him, and so he went to Jack. And Jack said, "Come on, I'll take you down to the university, and we'll get you set up." And they did. Another story, just to kind of illustrate with the friends, after Jack had died, two of his other really close friends went to his wife, and they said, "We want to go to dinner. We want you to go to dinner with us. We thought the world and all of Jack, and being his friends want to be yours." They knew that this is what Jack would have wanted, and he would have done the same if situations had been reversed. Jack and his mother. Jack loved his family, but he had a very, very special relationship with his mother. I wrote many letters she wrote after he died, and it just broke my heart because she never got over Jack's death. At this point, Jack was the fourth child. Wait, sorry, let me think about this. The fourth child to pass on, and the other siblings were either in their teens or 20s, so they knew their other children before they had passed. But I think Jack's death was the hardest on his mom. Jack always made sure to take care of her. When he attended the University of Utah, he worked as a janitor to support his mom. And more so when he was training, he sent home money to her every week because he knew that that would help her. He wrote his brother in 1943 that he desired that all of the brothers were to give their mother companionship and enjoyment from life, which she so richly deserves, and considering it his honor and duty, Jack had financially supported her, and that he was about to get married, and he wrote that he had nothing personally, nor do I desire anything to enter upon my marriage with, and that he would continue sending money. He also asked his brothers to help get money to buy their mother a better home, which the brothers did in honor of Jack after he had passed. When Jack was drafted in September 1941, he trained he did like aerial training, and then he ended up becoming a navigator. He graduated from Hondo Advanced Army Air School for navigation in April 1941, and he automatically became an instructor there. Later in 1944, Jack started training with his crew. They left the United States in late April to go over to Ireland. And what is interesting is both the co-pilot and pilot, the only survivors of his crew, both mentioned this trip. The co-pilot said that Jack navigated by stars and he came right in, absolutely dead on, where we were supposed to be. And the pilot said that Jack brought us in with precision through one of the blackest nights I've ever seen using dead reckoning and celestial navigation. They arrived at their airbase in early May 1944. Within a month, Jack was already training to become a lead navigator. And on his first mission, June 22nd, 1944, Jack flew with a crew he'd never flown with before on a bombing mission to Abbeville, France. Right at 7:09 p.m., when Alan Osterberg, the bombardier, said, "Bomb bay doors closing," flak hit the number 2 and 3 engines directly. The plane exploded, no one could get out, and only one man survived, and it was because he had been ejected from the plane. The plane crashed in Le Marais de Epinette, which is right outside of Abbeville, and Jack wasn't found until February 1945. He was found by locals 100 yards away from the wreckage near the Somme River. He was buried that day by the locals in the cemetery, and then he was later disinterred a year later and buried in Saint-André-de-l'Eure. He was buried here in Plot B, Row 10, Grave 17 on April 12, 1949, and he has laid here since. And I think it's incredible because he has been visited by so many people, a random person with the same last name, a group of Swedes who knew who he was and were so proud of a fellow Swede that they came to visit him. He's been visited by students and his family, and I know that he will continue to be visited by others. I just want to read a few things that Jack has written. One of them is some advice he gave cadets when they were doing their early training. And in this advice, which is titled "Never Whoops to Windward, a bit of wretched, correct, advice to class 43-A." And in it, Jack explains that everyone, you're going to get seasick. Not seasick. You're going to get sick from flying. And it's gross to clean up throw up. So he said, there's only one ideal method, and that is if you pardon me mine. So essentially what his idea was, you make a signal to the instructor, you look for them to look away, you maneuver your plane to a certain angle, you throw up, overboard, clear and free, as Jack said. And then Jack said, after landing, insist you weren't the least bit sick. You just wanted, to determine the proper banking angle. If you stick to your story, you can't be accused of being airsick. There's no evidence. Rid yourself of the corpus delicti. That's the trick. That is very much Jack's humor and how the Lundberg family are. They're very good storytellers with their words. And while Jack could be very happy and jovial and charismatic, he could also be very serious and poignant and thoughtful. 2 weeks after Jack arrived in England, he knew he was not going to come home. So he wrote farewell letters to his wife and his family. I don't think Jack and his wife really had a proper goodbye. He probably kissed her goodbye to go onto the base, and then he never came back. Because when they got there, they said, "Okay, boys, we're shipping you out right now." So I don't think they ever really got a farewell. And I just want to read a little paragraph that he wrote her, and then what the chaplain said about that letter, and then Jack's letter, and then we're going to finish. So Jack wrote in this letter to his wife, "If I do not come back, do not grieve unduly for me. You are still young, still beautiful, still desirable, still wonderful, and much too great a woman to let such an event affect your complete life. Remember me always, yes, but do not lose sight of which life has to offer you." And in response to some of this letter, Jack wrote, the chaplain of his bomb group wrote, "This letter reveals many things. First, it is a letter of high literary excellence. It is a literary masterpiece. Only a man schooled in the proper use of the English language could write such a letter. Second, the letter reveals the great and noble character of the husband who wrote it. He is a man of high quality, possessing the virtues of true greatness. Third, He is a man who stands beyond his own selfish desires, thinking of the happiness of the wife he loves. Fourth, he is a man who is not blaming others, not even the world, for his present circumstances of being in the war. Fifth, he reveals his true patriotism for his country, being willing, if need be, to sacrifice his life. To this noble end, he is serving his country. Sixth, he lives within the divine providence of God and lives with eternal hope in his heart, the hope of returning to the wife he loves. Upon his return, he is willing to pick up the pieces and start all over again, to build and to live, and as he says, to fulfill his ambitions. Now, as I read the letter Jack wrote his family, I want you to think about your soldier, because I know they must have thought the same thing that Jack was thinking when he wrote his farewell letter to his family. And this is what he wrote. Dear Mom, Pop, and family, now that I'm here, I see that my chances of returning to you are all quite slim. Therefore, I want to write this letter while I am yet able. I want you to know how much I love each of you. You mean everything to me, and it is the realization of your love that gives me the courage to continue. Mom and Pop, we have caused you innumerable hardships and sacrifices which you both made readily and gladly, that we might get more from life. I have always determined to show my appreciation to you by enabling you both to have more of the pleasures of life, but this war has prevented my doing so for the past 3 years. If you receive this letter, I shall be unable to fulfill my desires, for I have requested that this letter be forwarded only in the event I do not return. You have had many times more than your share of illnesses and deaths in the family. Still, you have continued to exemplify what true parents should. I am so sorry to add to your grief, but at all times realize that my thoughts are of you constantly, and that I feel in some small way I'm helping to bring this wasteful war to a conclusion. We of the United States have something to fight for. Never more fully have I realized that. There is just no other country with comparable wealth, advancement, or standard of living. The USA is worth a sacrifice. Remember always that I love each of you most fervently, and I am proud of you. Consider Mary, my wife, as having taken my place in the family circle and watch over each other. Love to my family, Jack. I turned 25 this year. It was a very poignant birthday for me because I am the same age now that Jack was when he died. I can't imagine having such maturity to write my family a goodbye letter and coming to terms that and being okay with dying at such a young age when everything in life was just supposed to be starting off. Having a family, watching your siblings have their family, and taking care of your parents as Jack wanted. But I'm so proud of Jack and everything that he accomplished in his life. One of Jack's nephews made a comment to me and he said, "You love Uncle Jack just as much as we do." And I realized, oh yeah, you're right. Jack has become my family, which I never would have thought that a man who is 79 years older than me would become such an influential person in my life and would change so many things in my life. A few years ago, I went to Jack's mom's grave on Memorial Day, and I made her a vow, and I want to make this vow to Jack too. I will do everything in my power to make sure you aren't forgotten, and that people know about you and your life and your story, because I know as you have changed my life, you will do the same. Thank you for everything you've done, Jack.